Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
Today on the podcast, we are in Pennsylvania with a longtime runner, a very long time coach, someone I asked the tech assistant to introduce. He just said, Bruce is a legend. Welcome today on the podcast, the legend, Bruce Frey. Hi, Bruce.
No, Matthew, thanks. It's my pleasure to be on here. I'm stuck in the 70s, basically. I don't really know what a podcast is, but I'm going to do my best to perform. We're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania right now. So I think it's only appropriate the day after Paul Skeens throws 7 no-hit innings against the Brewers and makes the All-Star team to give him a shout out. He's become my new idol, and the Pittsburgh Pirates are dear to me because I was staff. I worked at Three Rivers Stadium and PNC Park for 48 years. It's not like it's a foreign subject, but I'm glad to be here. I'm stuck in the 70s.
All right. Just for your background, I grew up in Johnstown, so I've let go of the Pirates, I'm sad to say, and I'm a Toronto Blue Jay fan, but I'm still Steeler black and gold. So
Yeah, that's
anyhow,
good. You'll grow out of the Blue Jays sooner or later. It's all right, but I'm sure that's not happening. But yeah, thanks for having me. But I'm certainly flattered to be here. But in a lot of ways, I am stuck in the 70s, certainly technologically. And when Skeens was on yesterday, I was listening to the transistor radio.
today we're going to talk about Bruce and his whole career. He's used to being on the interview side of the camera and
Yes.
microphone. We'll talk about all that. Let's start with your origin story as an athlete and as a runner. How did you get started?
I was born at a very young age. I would start with that. After that, my situation vastly differs from most of the people you'll interview in that my high school, Edgewood, Pennsylvania, right by the Squirrel Hill tunnels, we had no track team. I played football, basketball, and baseball. Track was like a novelty. I started to realize that if some of these guys that I was guarding in football as a defensive back and guarding in basketball were medaling in the WPIAA track meet, maybe I can't be that too far out of it. In the winter of 1971, there was a sprinter named Dr. Delano Merriweather who had not run competitive track. I think he was a couple years out of college. He infamously said to his wife watching the Melrose games, honey, I think I can beat those guys. He just started showing up at indoor track meets in 71. He started to win. That happened to be my junior year of high school. And that's when I figured, what have I got to lose? The first thing that sounded good to me is I didn't have to put any pads on. I'm not the least bit shy to say I years ahead of my time. I did not enjoy the contact aspect of American football. It was not good for me. I mean, I ran back kickoffs and punts, but I just didn't like it too much. So that sounded good to me. And Edgewood didn't have a track team, but within the borough of Edgewood is an institution, and they're still there going strong, is Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. They had a track team, in their athletic director happened to be the dad of a guy who was a couple years ahead of me at Edgewood. They allowed me to go train with them and learn. I had no clue what 5 times 300 meant. That meant nothing to me. That was a math problem. That's where I learned what interval training was, and I'm forever grateful to them. If I hadn't have found them, my training for track would have consisted of just going and running to Frick Park, and I would have known to do speed work. And lo and behold, my principal, the late John B. Major, he realized that I was in pretty good academic standing and that I could take an afternoon off to have my mommy and my daddy drive me to South Park, our district, the WPIAL, District 7 in Western Pennsylvania. Had qualifiers, 3 qualifiers, and then 8 would advance for me, blah, 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 and 2 for AA. But I think what ultimately derailed it, and you can relate to this, is mile time. They'd have these packs in the mile, for example, and you'd have 8 kids who were trying to just make it to the final while saving themselves for the 3,200, and they'd run 4:54. But then when they would compare themselves to the other heat, you had such variance in times that they just now, with online being what it is, you send in times from certified meets, and the top 16 in art level AA or the top 24 in AAA advanced.
So let me just pause here.
Yeah.
You're a three-sport athlete.
Yeah.
What was the role of competition in your personality?
Oh, I wanted to win, no doubt about it. I wouldn't have been out there all summer. My life consisted of going down to the ball field and playing whatever sport it was all day long. That's how I was raised up until I was in high school.
And those sports you were playing were all team sports. So what I want to
Yeah.
talk about is how did that translate over when you all of a sudden were out there on your own without even a track team?
I just went and tried to perform. I didn't think of it as that. I also played golf for Edgewood too. So that let me get a little bit of individual background in there. My senior year, I just did not enjoy the contact of football. In the WPIAL, golf is now a fall sport. So I bailed on football my senior year and played golf. So I got used to the individual aspect of it. But in that sense, I thought it was great. I didn't have to worry about if the line could protect me or not when I went back to pass, or if I was going to get clipped on covering. The bottom line is that took over my life. That went from becoming an activity to the activity. I would put it that way.
Let me ask you then about the first coach you had at the school for the deaf. Did you have a track coach?
Oh, not really. They would be anonymous figures to me. I feel horrible in that sense. I don't know who they were. I was just thrown into a pack of their workout, and I was just trying to be polite and fit in and not interrupt anything. I honestly don't know who those people are, but I'm thankful for them. There was a guy 3 years ahead of me at Edgewood, Chuck McDonough, who was running at Carnegie Mellon, which is a great Division III institute right here in Pittsburgh. He gave me a lot of pointers. He certainly helped me out once he realized what I was doing and it wasn't a prank and that I was serious about it.
Let's talk about what you remember in your first races. What were you wearing? What kind of facilities were there? What event were you?
Well, I remember it real well because I walked past there. Anytime I go broadcast or anything at South Park, I walk down the track, get into lane 6 and stand there. I was wearing my Edgewood basketball jersey, number 10. There was no track uniform. I was wearing my basketball uniform and some shorts. In 71, there was no such thing as Nike. There was those Onitsuka Tigers, people who were dominating footwear and were getting ready to take over because their big moment was coming up in Munich, their hometown in 1972, and that would be Adidas. And that's what I had. I had a pair of Adidas shoes on that I got at Jim DiOrio's Sporting Goods in Homewood because there was no Dick's then either. The good thing about South Park, the guy who used to run all this, Bob Bledgy out of Neshannock, he was the guy who I talked to who even let me in the meet in the first place because we didn't have a team. I believe that meet was at South Park because they had an artificial track. I'm sure I'm sure the Sam Bears of the world have gone on about artificial tracks and shit spikes and all that kind of thing.
Well, let's talk about what you were on. First race, you were wearing a basketball shirt, Adidas shoes. What distance was it?
I was essentially clueless. I ran all three. I ran the 100, the 400, and then the 200 later on. I did them all. As it turns out, in the 100, in the 200, I did not make the WPIAL final, but in the 400, I did. So therefore, I became a 400-meter runner. I didn't know any better. Charlie McDonough had told me that there's basically nobody giving out medals at the 200-meter mark. You don't want to go to the 200-meter mark and burn out. So I did. And I can see that vegetation to the right of me going down that backstretch in South Park. I can see that whole thing very clearly. And this is what I do in coaching to this day. We usually take all spring to try people in different events to see what their aptitudes are. I'm probably one of the few people ever whose first meet ever was a WPIL qualifier. I would consider that a rare feat.
Let's talk about then your next meet. You qualified for the WPIAL and the 440 at that point. No doubt. Did you get a shirt to wear from your school, or you still
No,
in high school?
you know what your man Yogi would say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why would I change? Plus, I was very proud of wearing an Edgewood basketball jersey. I had waited till I was 4 until I was 14 to be able to wear one. So I wore it with pride. Edgewood had championship basketball in the 1960s, and I was at every game. I was very proud to wear that shirt. And so I did. I would have been mortified if somebody would ask me to change. Again, there was no T-shirt companies or any of that stuff. There was no nothing. But yeah,
Wait.
I ended up, and again, I would also say I ran 54 something to get to the final, and a 440-yard dash, like a 54.3 is a 54.0 in 400. There's that 0.27. Or also, as a junior, I didn't use any blocks either because I had no clue about that. Because when I went to WPSD, I was just training. I wasn't up there doing block work. So I was in pretty much a wide receiver's football stance with my knees slightly bent and my leaning forward at the gun.
Other people in that race. Do you remember anyone else from that race? Did you meet anyone that you?
No, they were a little bit taken aback because again, there was no PA mile split or no seating or no nothing. That's one of our recurring themes. Nobody knew anything. Your job was to line up and go run against the people in your race. I wound up 53-7, and I think 7th in the WP. I think they only gave out 5 or 6 medals then, not like the 8 they give out now. I was a non-medalist, but the reality is I was hooked for life. There was no other way around it.
What happened then your senior year with running?
I stayed strictly I went to Neshannock High School. It's the same thing. I did trainings, not as much with WPSD because I had a fairly good grasp of it on my own. And the whole time I'm playing baseball for Edgewood. I'm the starting center fielder. I hit 545 my senior year. It wasn't like I was just doing track 5 days a week. And I was Edgewood's leadoff man and starting center fielder. So I got the track whenever I could. But fortunately, we didn't go that deep into May with baseball. So I was liberated to go. But I was also playing for what is called Wilkinsburg American Legion in the 70s. American Legion baseball was a big deal. Edgewood is a small town. They didn't have their own Legion team. If you lived in Edgewood, you could either go to one side to Swissvale or you could go to Wilkinsburg.
Let's drag this back to running.
Okay.
Your senior year, you're going to go back to the WPIAL.
Yeah.
Quite aware that you didn't quite get a medal. What was your senior year experience in running?
I didn't know about things like this. I mean, I ran as hard as I could in the trials, but the bottom line is I didn't have the brains to realize that I'd have to run ultra hard to get into the final at the WPIL meet. The reality of it is I ran in the slow heat, what I often call in coaching the sundial section. I won the sundial section in 51.5, a time I'll never forget. And I didn't even have the brains. I'm leaning over against the fence talking to my mom. I didn't even have the brains to time all the guys in the fast heat to see where I might fit in. The reality of it is I finished in 5th place overall. I got my nice little WPIL 440-yard dash medal that I wear to this day to the WPIL meet because I tease my kids, if you guys can wear your medals, then I'm going to wear mine. It's that simple. And I wear that to Slippery Rock or Baldwin or wherever the WPIL meet is. But that was the reality of it is, and again, in District 7 at the time, only 3 people advanced to the state meet, which was then held at Beaver Stadium at Penn State.
I ran states, and everybody knows we ran at Beaver Stadium. The inside lane, it wasn't level. Yeah. Wind tunnel. So you did not get there.
Yeah.
While you were in high school.
That's correct. So they only took 3. Now they take 5. And it's funny because my 51.5 is fairly, that's a 51.2 400. That would have been close to what is called SQS, state qualifying standards. But to me, just to win the race and to get a medal, I was on the proverbial cloud 9. I thought it was great. I was hooked. You know, I played the rest of the season for Wilkinsburg American Legion. I was fortunate enough to make the all-star team, although I wound up still being addicted to basketball too as I headed to college.
Let's finish up high school in terms of what was it like for you to pick a college? What kind of student were you? And what did you think you would continue to do as a runner once you
Oh,
left high school?
I'm pretty sure I was 13, 20 on the SATs. So I got accepted by Penn. I got turned down by Princeton. I got accepted by Baldwin Wallace. And I got accepted by Penn State University Park. And I wanted to go to Virginia from the beginning. Obviously, it was south down there, so it mean I wouldn't freeze. It wasn't in a city. And there were people I knew from Western Pennsylvania down there. And that just seemed like a good thing to do.
So
Right.
we're doing it by mail and telephone call. So how did you pick? And what happened?
My parents drove me to Charlottesville, Virginia for a home Virginia track meet. And it was the same thing as Dr. Delano Merriweather. And not so much as, honey, I think I can beat these guys, but I believe I can make the 4x400 relay or the mile relay if I get on a legitimate team.
So how was the transition then to college athletics, and who was your coach there, and how did that relationship
Well,
form?
I walked on to Virginia's basketball team. You know, the coach at that time, well, the head coach was Bill Gibson out of Donora, Pennsylvania. To me, that gave me an advantage. The returning ACC Player of the Year was Barry Parkhill, who still works for Virginia in fundraising from State College. The best freshman is Walker, probably my dearest pal down there, was from Millersville, PA.
Let me just put a fence around you a little bit.
Yeah.
You have an amazing memory for
Right.
people, times. Let's talk about how basketball related to your participation in track. What was your freshman year in terms of track? What was your track coach, and how that relationship developed?
This was the legendary Louis Honesty. He had been Virginia's track coach, I believe, for 21 years earlier. The guy's name, you spell it Onesty, Honesty, which obviously was the best policy back then. But I came after basketball was over, so I had to earn my keep. It time trial. Yeah, because I didn't do indoor track and field. There used to be things called dual meet where you would get in a bus and go to Chapel Hill and run the Tar Heel.
Of course, yeah. In high school, many of us were running 2 or 3 meets a week, completely different than today. You walk onto the track team, you're going to have to qualify by time. What was your relationship with the coach, and what kind of coaching did you get? You didn't have a lot of coaching in high school in terms of maybe very limited strategy and workouts. How did that change?
That changed when I was in a pack immediately. And I felt I was competitive in these early March workouts. Obviously, spring break took a toll, but once we got into the deeper part of March, I thought I was fine. But Coach Honesty wasn't ready to insert me in the lineup for the first dual meet at North Carolina State. We didn't take buses. You drove in these state cars, they were called, 5 and 6 to a group. And it became actually a little cliquishness was in there. I didn't fit in immediately. So I said, Coach Honesty, if I come to the track in Raleigh, can I compete? Oh, well, Don, why not, Mr. Frey? Even though my name is Frey. He would say, oh, yeah, Mr. Frey. Yeah. All right. So I basically hitchhiked down to North Carolina State in Raleigh. The bottom line is I went and ran a 51.5 there. I caught his attention. For my freshman year, I was pretty much on the 4x400 team for the most part of it.
Let's talk about that freshman year. You going from Virginia to North Carolina for that first race you did on your own. How far afield did the track team travel for the rest of that season?
All within the ACC, nothing further than that. The conference meet, I'm pretty sure, was at North Carolina State that year also. The one trip that we made, again, we only had one car because it was limited and it was in May. It was after the ACC meet, but at the University of Pittsburgh, there was the 3rd annual Pitt Invitational right at Pitt Stadium. That was a big deal because this was only 9 or 10 months after this guy, Dave Waddle from Bowling Green, a guy who wore the hat. Yeah, he was at this meet in 1973. So it was just an honor for guys like us to see a medalist in up close and personal. But that was certainly one of the highlights of my first year, and obviously having my parents be able to see it.
What was then the progression through the next years at Virginia for you? How did your track career go?
My sophomore year was difficult because I wound up having a leg concern, and it never really did work it out. I would consider that an incomplete. That didn't go well for me. The highlight of that year for me, before I had these injuries, was our dual meet. We went on a bus to Chapel Hill, and their thoroughbred decided to run the 400 meters that day for speed, for training. So he was in my race. That was Tony Waldrop, who in about 3 weeks would be on the cover of People magazine. Remember that when he ran all those 4-minute miles in a row?
Yeah.
So that was probably the highlight of my sophomore years, being in the same 400 race as Tony.
Did you see his back in that race?
Yeah, very much. I can tell you right now, it is the most disgusting shade of blue I've ever asked Mr. Grote about that. Anytime we'd be sitting somewhere in North Carolina beyond in basketball, it is such a disgusting shade of blue, obviously because he was a Duke guy. He was in 3 and I was in 6. I remember very well chasing him down the backstretch. Yeah.
What happened the next 2 years?
I got in better shape in 75. I was running in the better races. It served to get better for me. It did the best I could. I also didn't play basketball that year, so I was involved in indoor track, a lot of meets of VMI, Virginia Military, the state, and the other place that we went to, the AC meet indoors, Cole Fieldhouse, University of Maryland, the infamous boards. Even in 74, I should mention, before I got hurt, in indoor track, because I didn't play basketball that year either, we got to run there, and they have sections. Our section of the mile relay was, I think, 2 races after the 3,000 with Steve Prefontaine. So that's something that I'm always going to remember the rest of my life. It was called the Knights of Columbus track meet. My program from there is a very cherished thing. Seeing Pre right there, 2 or 3 pages away from my own self. That was a highlight, but 75 was fairly uneventful, running in all the major meets. In Thanksgiving of 75, in my senior year, my beloved coach Honesty, he had a heart attack at age 67 and passed away. So that left us with our assistant, a guy named Dennis Craddock, who was younger. This was when Virginia was transitioning to having people like me not on scholarship, and bringing people in on scholarship were good, but he also changed our thinking. He changed my 73, my freshman year. That was the first year of freshman eligibility. So that's when they ditched freshman basketball and started playing JV basketball. But by the time my senior year rolled around, they started phasing out JV basketball, and you don't see it anymore. It's long gone. JV basketball went the way of the 3rd place game at the NCAA Final Four. Remember when they used to have one of them? Here's one. If you ever want to shock your friends, who won the last 3rd place game in the history of the NCAA? Virginia in 1981. That you can tell your friends that. But in any event, they phased out JV basketball. So I ran indoor track, and Coach Craddock made a difference. I got a lot better. I started getting in higher stakes race. I was getting well under 50 seconds. I was leading off the mile relay. I learned how to use blocks, et cetera, et cetera. By my standards, I had a very successful year. They have, not every state does this with colleges, but in Virginia, they have a state meet where every college in the Commonwealth of Virginia goes and lines up on a track, which is good. You get Norfolk State in the sprints, you get William and Mary in the distance, you get Virginia Tech and everything. You had us in everything. And I came in 5th in the 440-yard dash there. I was pretty much placing everywhere there was. I didn't place, unfortunately, in the open Atlantic Coast. My senior year, that meet was held at Durham, which again, as your older people know, that's right on the football field at Wallace Wade Stadium, except they have those real high walls down there. I did not medal in the 440, but I medaled in the 1 mile relay for Virginia. It's good to have an ACC medal here. Is this visible?
Sure.
10 relays, Spirit of 76.
Nice.
So I got to do that. I got to run at Penn which was very meaningful for my mom because she went to Lower Merion High School in Philly, now famous for Kobe Bryant. So it was very nice to see her boy go run at Franklin Field.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the quality of the team in general. Was Virginia sending people to nationals in other
No,
events in track?
no, it's not like it is now. The To the best of my knowledge, other than maybe ROTC aid in a guy like Kent Merritt, who was our sprinter, who was a football player, I don't believe that our athletes were getting any kind of scholarship money.
Were any of them qualifying to go to the
Our,
NCAAs?
our triple jumper, Keith Witherspoon, got into the 50s in the triple jump. And I believe a guy named Phil Meyer, my freshman year, made it in the 5,000. He was in the real low 14s, maybe pushing 13 in there. But at that time, no. My medal that I got, I think we ran 3:16 or 3:15. We were not national class performers. That's just not the case. And obviously, it's changed since.
Well, let me ask you about your college in terms of what did you study there and what was your thinking that what was your life going to be at the end of 4 years?
No clue, no idea. That was my problem. I was an econ major, economic. And it was a lot of theory. I was outmatched from the beginning academically because coming from Edgewood, my first class that I walked into in Virginia, there's this auditorium with 200 people, and I'm ready to salute the flag and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I thought it was Friday afternoon. It was assembly, and the whole school was there. But no, this was just one class. But I bravely got through. I can honestly say that I have never applied my degree from the University of Virginia in any fashion.
Great.
Here, I'll go to the next level. I'll give them this much props. There's the. This is an original also.
Virginia track. That's it.
Right.
Big.
Yeah.
I don't know what font I don't know what font that is, but there's no graphics. It's just black on
Right.
orange.
Well, yeah, this is also whatever, 48 years old.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So
hey, I didn't want to do anything but what I'm doing now, to be honest with you.
let me ask you about how you were living through those 4 years at university. You were a sprinter exclusively. How much were you paying attention to and looking at distance running at that point? How well did you understand and relate to the distance runners?
That's a very perceptive and very good question on your part. I stayed in the 440-yard dash because Coach Honesty and certainly Coach Craddock, they saw me in workouts and they suggested that I try the 880 to move up, which ultimately is where I became good, but only in my 30s. But the reality of it was I was so focused on getting a varsity letter and staying on. If college outdoor track had a 4x880 relay, I would have gone to the 880. But I wanted to continue to be running in the AC meet. Again, is I like the team aspect of being with Beecher, Halsey, and Polo and all those guys. I liked being on their team. So that's why I resisted moving up. In looking back, I wish I would have earlier. As far as distance running, my distance buddies like Finn Pincus, that's really his name, Fin Pincus, Robbie Peck, they started asking me to come with them on 5 and 6 milers on their easy days. And I started to feel very comfortable. I didn't know I wanted to spend a lot of time on it, but the idea of running 6 miles, which I had never done till my senior year of college, that seemed like a good thing. That seemed relaxing, going through and looking at all the goats in the back roads of Charlotte. But you'd run past Art Garfunkel's house, among other things.
Let's talk then what happened with you upon graduation. Well, what did the world look like? What did you do? And how did you then stay involved in athletics?
Right out of college, I came home to Pittsburgh, lived in Edgewood, lived in my parents' house for a while until my brother and I bought a house 3 doors away in Edgewood. But the reality of it is I stayed amused by playing flag football, basketball for Casey's, softball in the spring, and running. The one thing about track and field is if you graduate college football, you don't make the NFL, you can't go back and play for Syracuse the next year. But if you graduate college track, you can run in a plethora of track meets. I'm sure you know who Harry Groves is. Oh, yeah, come on up anytime to bring your relay team. It's fine, which we did. Even though I was graduating college, we would compete at Penn Relays as the open distance medley relay. We went down there, we ran 10:07. That's not easy to do. We had a guy named Barry Harwood.
Let me hold on. Let me just get a hold on this. You're saying we. Who was we that was running in these relay events, Penn Relays and at
West Penn Track Club, anchored by a guy named Barry Harwood from Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, longtime Dartmouth coach. He split a 4:07 in the 1981 Penn Relays. We got third place medal against anybody. And also Bill Moorhead, who was in his transfer year from Wake Forest to Pitt, and Todd McShay, who was our half miler. We ran in the low 10s at Penn Relays.
And we're talking about distance medley at that point. You're no longer in the 4x4.
Yeah, but again, I'm only still running 400. I'm only running one lap. I'm pretty sure Moorhead gave me the lead. I'd put it that way. He ran a 3:01. He gave me the lead. I did my best. And again, this is Philadelphia Pioneers, New York AC. These are tough guys. I'm almost dead certain that Mike Shine was in the race.
Yeah, a famous name, sure.
So this is, you can look up these programs. The starter is Bill Cosby. He's doing all that. This was a deep situation. So that kept me interested. We would go to Colonial Relays. We would go to the Pitt Invite. We would go to West Virginia. It was almost like a collegiate track season. That's what kept me interested. But in terms of employment, it's floundered. I tried some sales jobs and it just didn't pay. It made no sense to me. And fortunately, I was rescued in the fall of 1981. Bob Duchin, my supervisor in life insurance, told me about an opening at his alma mater, Robert Morris. They were starting a cross-country team from scratch. This is with no formal cross-country experience, but I went through and explained to them. I don't know how many other people applied. I got the job.
Okay, I want to ask you then, just go back up a little bit. West Penn Track Club, was there a coach? What kind of training were you doing? How often were you training?
There was an iconic figure named John Harwick, Barry's dad. He ran this club, and it was one of the top clubs, black jerseys with gold trim. We'd put people in marathons. We'd go to summer meet. There was no formal West Penn Track Club practice, but I would simply go to the University of Pittsburgh and train with some people down there. There were good people there. Barry was doing graduate education there. He had his Dartmouth degree. In security wasn't as tight then, and we would meet at maybe 2 p.m. on our own, myself and Barry Harwick and Michelle. And there was another guy down there, Mel Boyd from Ringgold High School. We would go down there and run our 200s at the Pitt Fieldhouse. That was our practice. But we were in it together, and we knew what our capabilities were. And then obviously, my training for 440 was different than Barry's. We would at least on his speed day of doing 220s, I would be there with him. So that's how we worked out, and that's how we did things.
You got the job at Robert Morris, 1981. Yeah. Now we've made it through the 70s. Things have changed in the sport in terms of equipment, in terms of facilities. You started out on an artificial track, and you're running at Pitt. At Robert Morris, what was the state of the first team that you got together there in 1981?
Sorry. Here, wait. Here's the next one.
All right, Robert Morris. Looks like a running singlet. Yeah. What's on the breast there in the orange? It went a little faster. Some kind of little graphic.
It's called the Finals. Do you go that far back with a group called the Finals?
Well, put it back up on the screen, and we can show people.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
The corporate logo. Yeah. The Finals. They were the first ones to have like equipment catalogs, but that's what our athletic director believed was the most appropriate situation. That all came to play because in the 70s, they were a very successful junior college basketball program. They made it to the Nationals. My teammate from high school, Mark Ballback, he was a key player in them making it to the Nationals. under the legendary Gus Crop. But what happened was Robert Morris decided this was fun. They were the first school ever to jump from junior college to Division I in men's basketball. But the NCAA, there's a price tag that comes with that. This wasn't until a few more years later, till 85, they came up with these compliance guidelines. You had to have so many people at so many events in so many sports. So that's where I came in.
But you got started in 1981. So what was the
Right.
state? And you were forming just a men's cross country team.
Yeah, but then after that season, then I explained to them, if we want to be any good, we better add men's indoor track and men's outdoor track. It wasn't in time to have an indoor season, but in the spring of 82, we did have an outdoor track. And this might be 5 or 6 or 7 guys, and they weren't that good. They were all walk because they were all there when I got there. I didn't bring anybody in. I only got the job in August. So all I was doing was conducting signups and saying the Robert Morris was the Colonials. And I said, we're looking for some brave patriots to come out for this team and to come out and do their best. And just instead of just run on your own, come and get some super. And so that appealed to some people.
Let me ask you that. Let me ask you how you started as a college cross country coach, never having run cross country.
I went to Mr. Harwick and asked him for some ideas for training. I had started them on what I was doing for the 440, maybe multiplied by 4. If I would have been running 200s, these guys would be running halves. If I was just going to be running on a 2-mile fitness run, these guys would be running 7 or 8. So that's what we tried to do. And I read, obviously there was no internet, but I had talked to Barry enough, and even my college buddies in distance. I spent a lot of time in 81 on the phone going over things with guys, but fortunately nobody asked about my cross-country career.
Who did you compete against in 1981 as Robert Morris cross country?
A lot of the local schools, Duquesne University, Carnegie Mellon University, because of us being a small school, that Division I name that we picked up, it's not like we were Syracuse, West Virginia, Pitt, and Penn State. We kept away from that, at least for a while, at least for 5 or 6 years. We would go to the Division III meets. There was a Joel Varian Invitational in West Virginia. We went to St. Vincent College for one. We went to the local D3 places. There was an IC4A cross-country meet at Lehigh. I'm fairly sure we came in dead last in there 3 years in a row, 81, 83. I had a kid, I won't mention his name. He ran his 10K in the mid to high 40s, but we just had him on. We wanted to be a complete team. And to be totally honest with you, he crossed the finish line in 43 something. He was completely ecstatic because that was 2 minutes better than he ever had. And he started screaming at me, "Coach, I knew those intervals would pay off. I knew this would happen."
That's a great story. That's like the Samoan cross country skier. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of support. When did you first have an athlete that looked like they would become an elite athlete?
Oh, wow. I'd say not till the end of the 80s. At my time at Robert Morris, we never sent anybody to the Nationals. We were happy to get to the level below, which was the IC4A. Yale was one trip we went to, and I think it might have been Princeton one year. We wound up getting some people who could make it. A couple of them were soccer players. That's like a big Division I school using football players. We had a guy named Tony Bunbury who was under 11 seconds for 100 meters. He made it to the IC4As. We had a high jumper make it. I've always seemed to have had a good high jump back. So but the answer was it wasn't for about 5 or 6 years. It's the opposite of what's going on now. People were scrambling to get into leagues in the 80s. They're scrambling to get out of leagues.
Yeah. Let me ask you about that decade. 2 things. One, we'll talk about your personal running during the 80s, but also how did you add those technical coaching skills and information, high jumping, technical throwing events through that decade?
Yeah, I never messed with the throws, but by trial and error and by, again, talking to people and going to a clinic or two, I got to be good in the high jump. And to be honest with you, one of my better buddies, when I was training at the pit and at the university and at the field house and at the pit stadium, was Roger Kingdom. He needs no introduction. But do you guys understand that he was a 7-foot high jumper?
Hmm.
He was only the pole vault short of being, he was a very good thrower in Georgia. He was the Georgia High School Athlete of the Year after Herschel Walker was. His high school statistics are unbelievable. And I spent a lot of time with him in the high jump area because I used to just stand by the bar. I can still see it now in the far end zone, the far scoreboard side of Pitt Stadium. In Roger, in another guy named Dan Goodyear, who was a very good high jumper at Pitt, Barry's high school teammate from Mount Lebanon, he was very helpful once I started to realize I wanted to learn how to coach high jump. But Kingdom was a brilliant high jumper. Not everybody understands that.
And then, yeah, and he was at his most best in the high hurdles.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I spent a lot of more time with him. I knew him before he won in 84, but I just got to know him a lot better between 84 and 88 when he was around. Earlier, I wasn't that big on coaching high jump, but that's when I started to spend more time with him, and he was very helpful to me.
What about your own racing? You kept up attending Penn relays, and were
Yes.
you training? Did your training change during the 80s?
No, I train with my team. That's part of why they like me so much. Particularly across country, I did every foot of every workout, period. There's no other way to put it. Not in a competitive fashion. I wasn't out to beat people, but just to let them know I was out there. When cars are swerving and running red lights, I'm there with them. When the wind starts blowing in our face in the snow, I'm right there with them. That's part of why we had deep roots planted in our people. I don't want to brag or boast, but to this day, there are people from our 84, 5, 6. We get together once a year and go to a Robert Morris basketball game and just reminisce. We've done it for 30 some straight years. They have that much faith in me to come back. And these people aren't living in Moon Township. They're coming from New York and Maryland and Ohio and whatever. We planted deep roots in those days that still exist. And that's part of it is me being there the whole time. When I started getting more involved in coaching, I ditched competing as much. I didn't get good as a master's until the 1990s, but that was after I left RM, which is a whole different story.
Let's just finish up with the 80s. What competing did you do? Were you racing up through
Yes.
your end of Robert Morris?
Yeah, and Penn relays. I think you can also relate to this from Johnstown. Remember the old Keystone State game where they would split the state into 4 regions? Yeah, I did them. They had no master's bracket at that point. Also, when it was younger, it was at Penn State in the summer, and I think our district wore green and the South, Northeast wore yellow and whatever. But so I kept doing between that and Penn. That was good enough for me. And even the Pittsburgh Great Race, the faculty and staff at Robert Morris ran it as a fundraiser to get, but they had some team standing where they were basically glad to have me. I was the lead runner. So I did that for my school, and that let me build deeper roots with like stats teachers or management teachers or what is. So that's to being good with the academic side is always helpful if you're a college coach.
Well, let's talk about your college coaching then through the 80s. What changed in you most significantly? What changed in students? Was there change in the sport? Was there change in the way kids were becoming? Was there a change in you?
We got good because we had some people believe in what I was telling them. We would have $400 a semester scholarship grants. It was unbelievable. My stipend was laughable. I can honestly say I made more selling souvenirs with my buddy at the 1986 Gator Bowl than I did all season coaching Robert Morris to an undefeated season. Although it helped that Clemson was playing in that game, and because they're real close to Jacksonville, they buy a lot of stuff. But I definitely did. The bottom line is we got good. We won. It was called the ECAC Metro Conference. It's now called the Northeast Conference. Robert Morris just left it about 5 or 6 years ago. We won the conference in men's cross country 2 straight years, 86 and 87. And I can, again, you can look this one up, Casey Stengel. They have not won that conference since. They have not won the conference that they're in men's cross country since.
How do you think it worked? What made the breakthrough It was psychologically, was it physically? What made the breakthrough? How long did it take to build a team that would be undefeated and win conference?
It's 4 years. Here, I'll give you letter grades. 81, D minus, 82, D minus, 83, D, 84, C plus, 85, B minus, 86 and 87, A. That's how it went. That was the exact growth. And I started waking up. We got a guy who had finished in the top 10 in the Pittsburgh Marathon. I didn't know anything about it. Again, an academic guy tipped me off. Robert Morris had a branch campus in downtown Pittsburgh on Fifth Avenue. They've since sold it to Duquesne. This guy, Matt Meehan, he was commuting from the North Hills to this Pittsburgh campus because he didn't want to stay in a dorm and spend that money. He was a no-nonsense guy. He wanted to just go drive down there, go to class, come home and run. But what happened was we found him just because it's a different, he can run for Robert Morris. He made us good. Just finding out that there was people like that in your own vicinity, that it was a remarkable reclamation job just to go find these people.
Okay. Let's also talk about you. There wasn't a lot of money for you to coach or
Right.
for the program. What did you spend time in the off season or during season recruiting? How did you approach that?
I have strong roots here in Western Pennsylvania. I can drive to all these high schools with my eyes shut. Once you get better, then colleges notice you. That's nothing new. That's the way it is now in any sport. But what happened? People from West Mifflin, people from Kiski, they started to trust me and send their kids there, and they all got better. College coaches are looking for one easy ticket to get to the NCAA meet. They're looking for that one person where they could just sit there. I wasn't like that. I just wanted to get this pack and pull them together and see what they could become. I wouldn't know how to recruit somebody who was a 4-minute miler or whatever. I was looking for the dudes barely breaking 4:30, but had a lot of determination. I felt we could win. All I wanted to do was be successful at the Northeast Conference level, which was fine. They haven't won the meet.
Let's move on to another couple phases of your life. Certainly the coach's corner, 30 years behind a microphone and coaching at where you are now. Moving from Division I college to high school, how'd that transition happen? And how did you end up behind the microphone for all these decades?
Here, wait, one more second.
Another shirt to go?
Yeah, absolutely.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, Winchester-Thurston, right here in the heart of Pittsburgh, in the University and Hospital District of Pittsburgh. The reality of it is in 1988, a new athletic director came at Robert Morris. He wasn't buying what I was selling. The basketball coach was relieved ultimately. The soccer coach in men's was relieved. My position was opened up, so on. So that's the one thing I feel bad about is like I wasn't the only one singled out. Is we all know in athletic, the new AD can come in and just bring in whoever he or she wants to. So that's fine. There's a guy, Tom Kerwin, who was on the former Pittsburgh Pipers ABA champions, 1960. We were mutual friends with a broadcaster named Bill Raftery. To this day, he's the face of national TV in basketball in the Final Four. But from broadcasting, I met him. I was like a camp supervisor at the Bill Raftery Broadcast School. It was beautiful. Easily the greatest week of my life every year. For several years, it was in New Jersey, and for several years at Montclair State, and for several years, it was at Robert Morris. That's where I met the guy. Tom Kerwin at Winchester-Thurston, it's the same as Robert Morris. They wanted to start a cross-country team from scratch. So I sold them what I did. That was a pretty easy sell.
Well, let's find out. What year was that? And were they starting just boys at that point?
No, boys or girls were welcome. It was 1992, and unfortunately, Winchester-Thurston was not in the WPIAL. So we were just told to go and run in the local races, but that was fine. It was back closer to where I was raised, and I could see my parents and my family a lot more. I still lived out in the airport area where Robert Morris is, but it was a good reason to come home. In the meantime, in the 90s, I was assistant coaching at in tracks because Winchester-Thurston didn't have track until I started it all the way in 2008. I was at a place called Franklin Regional for 6 years and also at a place called West Allegheny for 7 years. I was always coaching all year long, but Winchester-Thurston, we joined the WPIAL not until 1998, I believe, or 99. At that time, I was much more intent on competing, I think, than coaching. Because in 1994, for example, I turned 40, and we all know that means the gloves have dropped. Hockey, the gloves drop when you hit age 40, and I took full advantage. 407, 1500 at Eugene, Oregon in the mile, 5th place in the nation, 40 and over. 426, 5th Avenue mile, New York City. It's funny because one of my runners right now is interested in applying to Villanova, and I have this newspaper clipping that American Jason Pyra of Brigham Young edged Irishman Marcus O'Sullivan 348. And it has all, it talks, and then at the bottom, in the Masters Mile, West Penn Track Club's Bruce Frey finished 4th in 4:26.9. So I was into things like that. I ran the Milrose game. That was great seeing you're coming around the curve and all of a sudden you're right where Hike Drexler's going down the runway in a long jump, where Jackie Joyner-Kersee or Boot in the pole vault. He's on the other side of the track. You go to that Milrose game, I swear that the people in Madison Square Garden cheer louder for the 40 and over than anybody. That's just what I think. Maybe it's because I'm running, and I think
The whole Masters community is a great community and very supportive. There's some elements of it, like your early team, a runner coming across the line in 43 minutes in the 10K celebrating, and everybody's there to pat him on the
Yes.
back. It's a great thing about Masters.
Yeah, you're 722 miles. You're drinking shots and having handshakes. That's fine because guess what? You stepped over the finish line, and most of these other people didn't. So
Let me ask you then how you were thinking about coaching, though. You were concentrating on competing yourself, but you're starting another new program. What was your outlook for building success there?
totally same blueprint at Winchester-Thurston as at Robert Morris. Run every step of every workout with the team. Show them that you're interested. Get involved off the court. I did other things like I was the girls basketball coach down here for a while. I just did everything I could to get involved. And that's just stay with the kids and show that you're interested. Do the workout. And they appreciated that and they kept coming back. In high school, as you well know, you have to share athletes. You don't go out and recruit them. It's more like blackjack. You just have to play the hand that you're dealt. You just try to do the best you can with what you were given. And let's not kid ourselves. All of your viewers agree on one point is that other than a conference meet, for example, everybody in cross country goes to every race. And I would say to a girl, look, I can promise you 26 minutes of playing time for a 5K. Can you get that in field hockey? Maybe not.
Sure. Yeah.
That's you. Suddenly, bench warmers in these other sports found us to be an appealing outlet.
No, that's great. Yeah. What about the rise there? Because Winchester-Thurston has had great success as a team.
Yeah.
Were there some breakthrough athletes, or was it as a
Yes.
group?
Well, yeah, there was a breakthrough crowd of them. To be honest with you, our first state championship was 10 years ago, 2014. In 2011, we had a unique phenomenon because the other thing that I did that you don't do in college is I started a middle school program, and I was in charge of that. And we were at the point where, again, a coach can tell you, it was very rare. Our middle school would have wiped out our upper school in a dual meet. That doesn't happen too often, but it's very true. And if you look at that middle school team, you have Ben Littman, who wound up being a WPIAL champ in running 4 years at Bucknell. You had named Tristan Forsythe, who was a 2-time state champion in track. I challenged him to run his area code. I don't know if you remember from calling me up, but Western Pennsylvania's area code is 412. He did it 2 years in a row. People laugh at AA track, but both years he ran 412. That was faster than the AAA time at the state meet 5 minutes later. So we had credibility. Tristan was there as a middle schooler. He later ran at Georgetown, in Indiana, in Bloomington. We had another guy. Tristan was in sixth. Ben was in seventh. Our eighth grader was a guy named Will Lovner. He won the Cleveland Marathon in 2023. He came in second in the Pittsburgh Marathon in 2024. 2 weeks later, he won the Cleveland Marathon again. He came in first place. 2 weeks later, he also got on these national TV shows for giving Emma, his fiance, an engagement ring after the race. That was pretty good. But when we had those three guys, our middle school was better than our upper school.
Then you, as a high school coach, are you licking your chops and saying, boy, I want to be working here in 5 years?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, very much. And I told my assistant, I said, we're at the point where when these guys grow up, nobody outside of this team in the state's going to be able to beat us. So we just got to make sure this team stays intact. Again, your District 7 people, the people who are really into this, I'll never forget it. I was on the 28X. I was on the airport flyer. It was Christmas Day almost of 2011. One of the better gifts I got. I'm minding my own business, driving through Oakland, reading the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, when Mike White, the Post-Gazette longtime sports writer, has this little blurb that the PIAA is breaking from 2 classifications in cross country to 3. And I realized we'd be an A. And I realized right then and there on that bus going out to the airport area where my car was parked that we were going to kick booty.
Way back, it was ABC.
Yeah, way back. But
And then it went to AAA and AA.
Yeah, but
Then it went-
in this district, it was never more than 2 levels. In the state of Pennsylvania, it was never more than 2 levels. But in track and field, it still is 2 levels. Our girls came in third in the state in outdoor track this year, and that's only with 2 levels, and we're a small school. The reality of it for 2012, but that's when we began 3 classes. In 2013, when those guys were a little bit older, when Tristan was still in 8th grade, but Ben and Will and Landon Delaney, who wound up being very good and also running at Bucknell, we wound up third in the WPIAL. We made it to the state meet. We finished tied for 8th, but by tiebreakers, we finished 9th. In 2014, first, 2015, 3rd, 2016, first, 2017, 4th, 2018, 2nd, 2019, 1st, 2020, 3rd, 2021, 2nd, 2022, 3rd, 2023, 4th. That's 10 straight years in the top 4. How many teams are going to do that? I know all about Coach Roth and Southern Columbia football because I'm a broadcaster. I don't see that happen that often. And I'm sitting here telling you 2024 is going to fit the mold. We just happen to get a bunch of good guys at the same time.
You don't get a good bunch of guys for 10 years. It's not the same bunch of guys. It's definitely a program and a culture that creates that kind of long-term success. Let me ask you about the transition. We're well out of the 70s now, but coaching college, it's a different thing to coach high school. Parents are involved. And the changes over these past 10 or more years, how have parents' involvement in sports? When success came, what transitions happened then?
No matter where you coach, it's always going to happen. It's inevitable, Matthew. I think you're very well aware of that. I've always told people that in the biggest nuisance that you have in college is keeping your kids from drinking. The biggest challenge you have in high school is dealing with the parents. But again, they've been mostly responsive. It's very helpful that 2 of our best runners this year in 2024, class of 2025 to graduate, had brothers who happened to be the exact same class of 2020 and were captains on a state championship 5 years ago. A lot of it is having the same parents. But to be totally honest with you, part of what I like, you asked about a long time ago, you asked about how was it like competing in track and not being on a team so much. I've always liked it. To be honest with you, I could have I've coached my share of Colt League baseball. I've coached Winchester-Thurston girls basketball. I like this because you don't have to say 5 people are going out for that opening tip and the rest of you are going to sit. And that's when parents get the most anxious. But here in the United States, where I'm broadcasting, if you surveyed the fans at a high school football game, anywhere from 60 to 70% of their sons are going to be in the NFL.
Yeah, there's no point not having a dream, but the
Yeah,
reality,
I use the word myopic. We just have some parents who are myopic, in particular with sports selection. We're looking at a girl running a 58-second quarter. Do you think she could play basketball for Duquesne? Probably not. Do you think she could run track and field for Duquesne? Yeah, she'd be in there. It happens in soccer. It happens in any sport. And we try to realistically ask people, or if somebody medals in the WPIAA meet, that they're in the top 15 runners in cross country. But are they in the top 15 in such and such sport also? Probably not, out of the whole WPIAL. You can even ask Sam Baer when he was working with a young lady who played basketball for Sheila, Brianna Schwartz. His quote in the post was, "Unless she's the female LeBron, she's in the wrong." So Sam can understand what I'm trying to mention. But then again, we started to get more people coming over in track and field. We're doing very well now, but the parents, there's always going to be differences. There's always going to be people who want to do their own thing. Like there's a red, white, and blue meet in Pittsburgh. It has single A, double A, and triple A. You can run anywhere you want. It's the first meet of the year. We have a guy right now who wants to run into triple A, even though we still want to have our team in single A for now for the first meet to let the freshmen get acclimated. So you have things like that where you just have to sit the guy down and talk to him and say, we're in it as a team.
What about equipment in terms of what the school provides, about parents getting involved to get their kids their own shoes? Is there cooperation there? What about the partying of the kids and the specter of preparing? Some of them are going to go on to continue their career after they leave you as a coach. And there's going to be the challenge of potential doping. They're going to run into that kind of thing. What kind of preparation do you end up being able to do, and how's that changed?
I do my absolute best with that. I try to use my own example where nobody's going to wake you up and have you go to class. That's what did me in academically, is you could be out whenever you wanted to at night. There's no truant officer. Nobody's going to come around. You have to want to be there. This is a pretty solid academic school. I typically don't have to discipline people for throwing stuff out the window of school buses or things like that. You don't have to discipline them on the academic side. I just try to talk to them about the alcoholic side, where everybody is going to want to be your friend just to go out with you, but then they might ditch you after you've maybe had too much, or maybe when a security officer comes or whatever. You got to try to do your best. Our team wound up having 5 Division I athletes on it. Boston College, Georgetown, Penn State was Will, and 2 at Bucknell. So we're used to sending people to major colleges, although we've sent a lot to the Division IIIs in the last couple of years. One of the guys I mentioned with a brother, Sean Heinzelman, he's just finished at Allegheny, which is a Division III school. He had a nice career there. I'm trying to use my shortcomings as the past as fodder for them to learn from.
That's the best thing to do. That's a great story, Bruce. What about your personal career run out now? In the 80s, you were on 30 on the street miles. And as with a lot of us, as you get into master sports, the distances get longer because your fast twitch muscles don't perform as well. What happened then for you in the last couple decades of competing?
Stayed in the 800. I ran that mile in Eugene, Oregon. I ran in 1994 when I had just turned 40. I was told to get into Milrose games. I'm just like in college, I was in the mile relay because it was more accessible. I ran the mile at Eugene, Oregon, so I could use that to get into the Milrose games. It was the Chemical Bank Milrose Masters Mile. The one thing that was interesting, I ran on September 29th, 2001. I ran the Fifth Avenue Mile. It's my understanding that was the first athletic event held in New York City after the terrorist attacks. The Yankees hadn't started, the Mets hadn't started, the NFL, I think, started the next day. But that was somber, flying into that place in September, because they were allowed to continue to do it. But flying into that place in September 2001, that was crazy. That was nuts because there was still smoke coming out of those towers. So that is a T-shirt I'll always have. The Pontiac Grand Prix mile in running in that particular event, right down Fifth, right through Central Park. So that was certainly one of the more meaningful races I've ever performed in. I think I was sixth or whatever, but just the fact of going there and doing all that on September 29th, 2001, that was amazing. That was crazy. That was probably my last real street mile. Did you ever hear of the Arnold 5K pump and run?
I don't think so. I don't know. I spent most of my life out in North America.
Arnold Schwarzenegger has this fitness campaign in Columbus, Ohio. He's very partial to that city because that's where the Olympia was in the 70s. And so that's where he became famous, by competing in Columbus. He has this major expo, this fitness expo, and part of it is they take you at 9 in the morning, they weigh you in, they hand you a card, you take the card to these Marines who are standing there in camouflage pants, and you're in this gym where there's 25 benches. You hand the guy your card, they put that much weight on the bar, and you bench it as many times as you can. But if you're 40 and over, you get like a 30% discount. So my 160 was minused out by 48 pounds, or whatever. But the most benches you're allowed to do is 30. Again, you figure this one out. So they stop you at 30. Elite people can do 30. I've had a long career of benching. 30 was no problem for me. What happens is every rep you do gets 30 seconds taken off of your time. So you go to the starting line of the race a half an hour later, and I already know that I'm minus 15 minutes. But what happens is you're standing there freezing at March at the starting line, waiting and waiting. And all of a sudden, this black limousine, this Cadillac limousine, comes slowly creeping down the street. And this guy gets out surrounded by 4 goons, and he starts talking. Hey, Governor Schwarzenegger's here. And he's very, okay, guys. Okay, don't be nervous. How many of you did 10 reps of bench? Don't be nervous. Raise it. And people are, oh, I did 11. How many? And he works all the way. How many did 30? Oh, great. And Arnold shoots the gun and you run a 5K. Even at age 50, it's totally flat. Anybody who's been to Columbus knows that. It's 100% flat. So I ran a 17:41. You take 15 minutes out of there. My net was 2:41. That was third place. There's over 500 people on it. So I started to do things like that. But to make a long story short, the last time I ever stepped on a competitive track was in 2005. In the United States, there's the National Masters Games. That's for track only. But then they have these national senior games. It's a competition for almost anything, volleyball or powerlifting or track and field. And it happened to be at Carnegie Mellon, right where I trained a lot, in a mile, not even from my school. By then, my mom was in a wheelchair. I propped her up at the 200-meter mark in her wheelchair. In my 2 high school coaches in their 70s, they were there rooting for me. In basically, at age 51, I went 2:12.9 and won the national. That's the last time I stepped on it.
That's a great way to go out.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Okay, so what's next for you in terms of your personal training? You don't run with the team anymore, right?
No, I just try to do what I think every 70-year-old should do. I try to, out of biking, running, and lifting, I try to do 2 out of 3 every day. It's just that simple. If I never put on another uniform, people are saying, oh, you just turned 70. All you got to do is run a 2:45, blah, blah, blah. I just don't want to hear it. I'm a coach. My teams are ranked highly in the preseason heading into this. I'm going to coach it out. I don't know how to say this properly, but I've run enough medals for 4 people. I don't need any more. That's fine. I closed on a winning note, and I'm going to leave it. I'm a fitness athlete. My mama spent 100 months, which is 8 years and 4 months, in nursing home. And what you find out is the wealthiest people in nursing home aren't the Mellons and the Rockefellers. They're the people who can walk. And if you can walk, you're ahead of anybody else in a nursing home. And if you weigh a lot, it's hard enough to get one lady to come and attend to you and roll you over and change your diapers. It's near impossible to get two. So you better be in fit enough so that one person can roll you over. That's my motivation now, not winning medals in the Masters games, is staying out of the nursing home as long as I can. If I do have to go to one, staying fit enough that one person can attend to me. That's my motivation. I don't have to worry about hundredths off a stopwatch.
Okay, I don't think we want to end the podcast with that.
Oh, no, that's
Our doomsday scenario. It's a great philosophy, and it's something that everybody, if they haven't thought about it, needs to think about as we're all getting older. Let's end it with I look forward to next year. What do you do with your athletes in the summer now? What's going to happen with you before next fall, before the season starts, and we'll check back with you then.
We have fun runs. Official practice starts Monday, August 12th, but I let it be known that I'll be riding my bike through Frick Park on such and such day, and they come over, and that's where you get the incoming freshmen to meet with each other. I don't think that's any different than football's 7-on-7 camps or basketball's leagues that they play or American Legion. It's just introductory. We're not conducting time trials. We're not selecting a roster. We're just trying to get people to run. The biggest change for us, real quickly, our school is located in Pittsburgh here. There are a number of schools around here that stop in 8th grade. So all those students have to go somewhere for upper school.
The funnel effect. Yes.
Yeah, I call them unrestricted free agents because you get them without compensation. If they choose to enroll here, so be it. We're just trying to welcome them to what we do and how we train.
Very cool. It's been great. Thanks for your time, Coach Frey.
I don't know what your is on time, but did you talk about a positive note? Everybody used to tease back in the 70s and early 80s the group Van Halen because they had that contract. They had that stipulation in their contract that they had to have M&Ms in their dressing room with no brown M&Ms anywhere in the package. And everybody said, this is foolish. This is, why would you do this? This is preposterous. And their attorney said, the only reason why we did that is we wanted to see who was going to read this far into the contract. So I'll leave you with that. We'll see if anybody asks you about brown M&Ms. That means they went all the way through this podcast.
I'm not sure I'm going to leave that in. I'm sure, though, that everybody who knows you, Bruce, will look forward to hearing this or familiar with your voice. Hopefully, some of the kids you coach will have a chance to hear this too. And
I hope so too.
As long as you don't take one more shirt off, we won't have to put any kind of warning.
Good. Thank you very much for your help. I appreciate it. Thanks for putting up with me. Thanks for your time.
All right. Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Matthew. My pleasure. All right. Thanks.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.